morning sun streamed through the blinds as Ling awoke in her new bedroom. It was smaller than her old room back home, with walls that needed a fresh coat of paint and a ceiling that sometimes leaked when it rained hard. But it was hers, at least for now. She stared at the ceiling, counting down the minutes until she'd have to face another day at Roosevelt High. 3 weeks had passed since her family moved to this small Midwestern town, and each day felt longer than the last. "Ling, breakfast ready?" her mother called from the kitchen, her voice carrying the same accent that made Ling shrink in her seat whenever she was asked to speak in class. "Coming, Mom," she replied, pulling herself out of bed. The small apartment smelled of rice porridge and pickled vegetables, a taste of home that both comforted and worried Ling. What if her clothes absorbed the smell? Would the kids at school notice and have one more reason to whisper behind her back? Her father sat at the kitchen table, circling job listings in the local newspaper. The dark circles under his eyes had become a permanent feature since they left Shanghai. He looked up and smiled at her, but Ling could see the worry lines deepening around his mouth. "My smart girl," he said in Mandarin. "Ready for school?" Ling nodded, not wanting to burden him with her problems. Her father had been a respected engineer back in China, but the factory closure had left thousands without work. Now he was applying for janitorial positions and night shifts at the local factory, anything to keep them afloat. "I made your favorite," her mother said, placing a bowl of porridge in front of her. "Need energy for learning." Ling's mother had once been a music teacher. Now she cleaned houses for the wealthy families in the better part of town, coming home with stories about grand pianos gathering dust in living rooms where no one played them. Ling ate quickly, her stomach tight with anxiety. Her old school uniform was replaced by clothes from the donation center, a pair of jeans that were slightly too short, and a sweatshirt bearing the logo of a college she'd never heard of. She'd carefully removed a small stain near the collar with her mother's sewing skills, but she still felt marked as different. "I go now," she said, shouldering her backpack, also secondhand, with a patch covering what must have been someone else's name. "Wait," her father said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small folded paper crane. "For luck. I put in your pencil case last night." Ling smiled, touched by the gesture. Before their move, her father had taught math at the university. Now he spent evenings folding paper cranes, each one containing a small wish for their future. The walk to Roosevelt High took exactly 17 minutes. Ling had timed it, preferring to arrive early when the hallways were still empty. She could slip into her first class without navigating the crowded spaces where conversation stopped when she passed by. Today, however, a group of students already gathered near the entrance. Ling recognized them immediately, the ones who occupied the central tables in the cafeteria, who seemed to move through the school as if they owned it. "Hey, look who it is," said a tall girl whose name Ling thought was Brooke or Brooke. She nudged her friend, a boy with carefully styled hair. "It's the dictionary girl." The nickname had stuck after Ling's second day when she'd been caught using a small electronic translator during class. The teacher had been kind about it, but the damage was done. Now she was dictionary girl, when they bothered to acknowledge her at all. "Nice pants," the boy said, his eyes dropping to the gap between her jeans and her socks. "Waiting for a flood?" Laughter rippled through the group. Ling kept her eyes down, clutching her backpack straps as she walked past them and into the building. "She doesn't even understand English," someone stage whispered. But she did understand, every word. She just couldn't find the right English words fast enough to respond. By the time she translated her thoughts from Mandarin to English, the moment had passed and she was left with unspoken comebacks that dissolved on her tongue. The morning classes passed in a blur of anxiety. In physics, her best subject, she knew all the answers but kept silent. In her old school, she'd been at the top of her class. Here, she was afraid her accent would overshadow her knowledge. Lunch period arrived and Ling followed her usual routine, getting food from the cafeteria and finding an empty classroom to eat in. Today, she chose the art room, with its smell of clay and paint that reminded her of weekend classes she'd taken in Shanghai. As she ate her sandwich, she pulled out the paper crane from her pencil case. Her father had written something inside, as he always did. Carefully unfolding it, she read the characters. "Music speaks when words fail." Her throat tightened. Back home, their apartment had been filled with music. Her mother's guzheng in the corner of the living room. The old upright piano where Ling practiced every day after school? The classical records her father played on Sunday mornings. Now their apartment was quiet. The guzheng left behind, sold to help pay for their move. The silence was another reminder of all they had lost. Finishing her lunch, Ling wandered the empty hallways. Most students were in the cafeteria or outside, enjoying the mild spring weather. Passing the auditorium, she noticed the doors were propped open. Inside, a stage was being set up with colored lights and a microphone stand. A poster by the door caught her attention. Annual Roosevelt High Talent Show. Sign-ups this week. Ling stepped inside, drawn by curiosity. The auditorium was large, with rows of seats facing a proper stage. And there, gleaming under the stage lights, was a grand piano. Her feet carried her forward before she could stop herself. It had been months since she'd touched a piano. The last time was the goodbye recital at her music school in Shanghai, where her teacher had hugged her tight and pressed a book of Chopin's music into her hands as a parting gift. "You must keep playing," her teacher had said. "Promise me." But that promise had been impossible to keep. Until now. The piano was beautiful. Polished black, its lid propped open to reveal the complex inner workings of hammers and strings. A small plaque on the side read, "Donated by the class of 1985. Glancing around to make sure she was alone, Ling set down her backpack and approached the instrument. Her fingers hovered over the keys, not quite touching them, remembering the feel of ivory under her fingertips. 11 years. That's how long she'd been playing. Since she was 4 years old, sitting on her mother's lap during lessons. By 6, she was performing in small recitals. By 12, she'd won a regional competition that had opened doors to the prestigious Shanghai Music Conservatory's weekend program for gifted children. Then everything had changed. The factory closing, her father's desperate search for work, the decision to use their savings to move to America, where her father's cousin had promised connections to jobs and affordable housing. The cousin had meant well, but his promises had faded once they arrived. The jobs didn't materialize, the housing was temporary, and Ling's music had been sacrificed in the chaos of survival. She sat on the bench, her back automatically straightening into the posture her teachers had drilled into her. Just sitting there felt like coming home. Her fingers pressed down gently on a key, a middle C. The note rang out clear and true, filling the empty auditorium. She played another note, then another, forming a simple scale. The piano was perfectly tuned. Much nicer than the upright she'd practiced on at home. Lost in the moment, Ling began to play a simple piece from memory, a Bach prelude she'd learned years ago. Her fingers remembered the patterns, moving from key to key with growing confidence. The music wrapped around her like an old friend, lifting the weight of loneliness from her shoulders for the first time in months. She didn't hear the auditorium doors open. Didn't notice the group of students entering until their voices broke through her concentration. What is she doing? Ling's hands froze above the keys, the music cutting off abruptly. She turned to see 5 students walking down the center aisle, the same group from outside the school that morning. Brooke was in front, eyebrows raised in surprise. "Sorry," Ling said automatically, standing up from the bench. "I go now." "Wait," said the boy with styled hair. "Were you actually playing that?" Ling nodded, her cheeks burning with embarrassment at being caught. "No way," said another girl, this one with bright purple streaks in her hair. That sounded like real music. The way she said it made Ling understand. They were shocked that someone like her could play anything worth listening to. "I learned piano in China," Ling said, her English simple but clear. "Long time." "Well, go on then," said Brooke, gesturing toward the piano with a challenging smile. "Show us what you've got, piano girl." The others laughed, pulling out their phones. They expected her to fail, to provide them with another joke at her expense. Ling stood frozen, caught between humiliation and something else, a flicker of the determination that had once earned her medals at competitions. She thought of her father's paper crane. Music speaks when words fail. Her English might fail her. Her clothes might mark her as an outsider. But music. Music had always been the language she spoke most fluently. Slowly, she sat back down at the piano bench. Ling's heart hammered against her ribs as she settled back onto the piano bench. 5 pairs of eyes watched her, phones raised to record what they assumed would be an embarrassing moment they could share later. The weight of their expectation pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy coat. For a moment, her mind went blank.
What should she play?
The Bach prelude was too simple. They'd find a way to mock that. A memory surfaced. Her final recital in Shanghai. The piece that had earned her a standing ovation and brought tears to her teacher's eyes. Too difficult, she thought. I haven't practiced in months. But her fingers seemed to have ideas of their own. They positioned themselves over the keys, muscle memory taking over where confidence faltered. Well, Brooke called out, her tone dripping with impatience. We don't have all day. The boy beside her snickered. Maybe she only knows chopsticks. Ling closed her eyes. She thought of her mother, who had sold her beloved Guzheng to help pay for their plane tickets. She thought of her father, folding paper cranes late into the night when he thought everyone was asleep. She thought of the silence in their small apartment that had once been filled with music, and then she began to play. The opening notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor filled the auditorium, gentle at first, like raindrops on a window before building into a storm of sound. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with precision born from thousands of hours of practice. Each note was clear and purposeful, rising and falling like waves on an ocean she had crossed to come here. The piece was a story in itself, beginning softly, building to moments of intense drama, then retreating to quieter passages that felt like whispered secrets. It required not just technical skill but emotional depth, the ability to move between moments of tenderness and thunderous power. Ling forgot about the students watching her, forgot about their phones recording, forgot about the too short jeans and the second-hand sweatshirt. In that moment, she was just a girl and her music, speaking a language that needed no translation. Her body swayed slightly as she played, leaning into the emotional crescendos of the piece. This was the music that had lived inside her during silent lunch periods and lonely walks home. This was the voice she couldn't find in English class, finally set free. She didn't notice when the purple-haired girl lowered her phone, her mouth slightly open in shock. Didn't see Brooke's smirk fade into a look of confusion, then reluctant admiration. Didn't register the boy's eyes widening as he realized what he was witnessing. More students wandered into the auditorium, drawn by the music spilling out into the hallway. They stood at the back, watching the small figure at the grand piano filling the space with sound too big, too beautiful to be coming from the quiet girl they'd barely noticed before. A middle-aged man with a music folder tucked under his arm appeared in the doorway. Mr. Chen, the music teacher. He stood perfectly still, listening, his expression changing from curiosity to disbelief to something like wonder. Ling's fingers danced through the most technically challenging section of the piece, notes tumbling over each other like water over rocks in a stream. This was the part that had taken her months to master, the part her teacher in Shanghai had made her practice again and again until her hands ached. Now, despite the months without practice, her fingers remembered. The final notes hung in the air like the last light of sunset before fading into silence. For several heartbeats, no one moved. No one spoke. The spell of the music lingered in the auditorium, and breaking it seemed impossible. Then someone began to clap. Then another person, and another. Ling's eyes flew open. The auditorium was no longer empty. At least 20 students stood scattered throughout the space, all looking at her with expressions ranging from surprise to awe. At the back, Mr. Chen was applauding slowly, deliberately, the way one musician acknowledges another. Holy crap, the purple-haired girl breathed, lowering her phone. That was insane. Brooke seemed at a loss for words, her usual confidence shaken. The boy beside her cleared his throat. Where did you learn to play like that? Before Ling could answer, Mr. Chen was walking down the aisle toward the stage, his steps quick and purposeful. Young lady, he called out, his voice carrying the slight accent of someone who, like Ling, had come to this country from somewhere else. What is your name? Ling, she answered, suddenly shy again now that the music had stopped. Ling Zhang, he repeated as if memorizing it. He reached the stage and looked up at her, something like recognition in his eyes. Where did you study? Shanghai Music Conservatory, she said, her voice small but clear. Weekend program for children. A murmur ran through the gathered students. Even those who knew nothing about classical music could tell from Mr. Chen's reaction that this was significant. And this piece you just played, Chopin's Ballade No. 1. When did you learn it? Last year, Ling said. For spring recital. Mr. Chen nodded as if confirming something to himself. And how long have you been at Roosevelt High? 3 weeks. He frowned at this. 3 weeks. And you haven't come to the music department? Ling looked down at her hands, still resting on the piano keys. I thought, no piano at home now. No reason to study music anymore. Mr. Chen's expression softened. He understood what she wasn't saying. The story of immigration and loss, of priorities shifting from art to survival. He had lived that story himself, decades ago. There is always reason for music, Ling, he said gently, especially when other things are difficult. He turned to address the students who were still watching, some filming with their phones. What you just witnessed was extraordinary. The piece Miss Zhang played is considered one of the most challenging in piano literature. Professional pianists spend years perfecting it. Brooke stepped forward, her expression complicated, part embarrassment, part defiance. We didn't know, she said, as if that explained everything. She never talks to anyone. Perhaps, Mr. Chen replied mildly. No one has truly listened to her until now. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch period. Students began to move reluctantly toward the exits, casting backward glances at the girl still sitting at the piano. Don't be late for class, Mr. Chen called after them. Then more quietly to Ling, except you. I'm writing you a pass for your next class. We need to talk. As the auditorium emptied, Ling remained on the bench, her fingers still touching the keys lightly, as if afraid the piano might disappear if she let go completely. How long has it been since you played? Mr. Chen asked when they were alone. Since we left Shanghai. 4 months, he shook his head, impressed. To play like that after a 4-month break. You have a rare gift, Ling. She looked up at him, surprised by the gravity in his voice. Our spring concert is in 6 weeks, he continued, and the talent show is next Friday. I want you to perform at both. Panic flashed across Ling's face. Playing alone in an empty auditorium was one thing. Performing in front of the whole school was another. I don't know, she stammered. You don't have to decide right now, Mr. Chen said, but promise me you'll consider it. And more importantly, promise you'll come to the music room after school today. You need to practice, and I suspect you don't have a piano at home. Ling nodded slowly. Good, he said with a smile. Now, let me write that pass for you. As she walked to her next class, English, the subject she dreaded most, Ling felt different. The weight on her shoulders seemed lighter. The stares from other students as she passed didn't burn as much. Something had changed in the auditorium, though she wasn't quite sure what. English class was already underway when she arrived. Ms. Park looked up from the whiteboard, ready to scold the latecomer until she saw the pass in Ling's hand. Her eyebrows rose as she read Mr. Chen's note. Take your seat, Ling, she said, her voice warmer than usual. As Ling made her way to her desk at the back of the room, she noticed something strange. People were looking at her, not with the usual mix of indifference and mild disdain, but with curiosity. Some even smiled slightly. On her desk was a folded piece of paper. Opening it cautiously, she found a message scrawled in blue pen. Your playing was beautiful. Do you take requests? Dylan! She turned to see the boy with styled hair, Dylan apparently watching for her reaction from across the room. He gave her a small nod, nothing like the mocking smiles from before. Ling slipped the note into her pocket, a strange warmth spreading through her chest. For the first time since arriving in this town, she felt something like hope. The piano had given her a voice when words failed. And perhaps, just perhaps, people were finally ready to listen. The final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day. Ling gathered her books slowly, still thinking about the note from Dylan. 3 more had appeared on her desk during her last 2 classes, one asking if she'd be in the talent show, another wondering where she'd learned to play so well, and a third simply saying, that was amazing. She hadn't answered any of them. The words wouldn't come, not yet. It was easier to speak through music than to suddenly become chatty with people who had ignored her for weeks. As the classroom emptied, Ling remembered Mr. Chen's invitation to practice in the music room. She made her way through the crowded hallways, noticing how differently people looked at her now. Some nodded in recognition. Others pointed and whispered, but their whispers didn't seem mean-spirited anymore. There she is, she heard someone say. The piano girl. The nickname had changed meaning in the space of a few hours. The music room was empty when she arrived, except for Mr. Chen sorting through sheet music at his desk. He looked up and smiled. "Ah, Ling, you came. Excellent." He gestured toward an upright piano against the wall. "It's not as grand as the one in the auditorium, but it's well maintained." Ling set down her backpack and approached the instrument. It was an old Yamaha, its black finish dulled with age, but its keys clean and white. She pressed a few notes, checking the action and tone. "It's nice," she said, meaning it. The piano responded well to her touch. "I've been thinking about your situation," Mr. Chen said, pulling up a chair near the piano. "You have remarkable talent. It shouldn't go to waste just because," he paused, searching for the right words. "Because we poor now," Ling finished for him, her bluntness surprising even herself. Mr. Chen nodded, respecting her honesty. "Yes, many immigrant families face this challenge. The arts are the first thing sacrificed when survival is at stake." He handed her a folder of sheet music. "For you to practice. The school has a small fund for promising music students. We can arrange for you to use this room whenever you need." Ling took the folder with trembling hands. Inside were copies of the Chopin piece she'd played earlier, plus several others, some she knew, some she'd always wanted to learn. "Thank you," she whispered. "Now, about the talent show next Friday," Mr. Chen continued. "I'd like you to perform. It would be good for you and good for the school." Ling bit her lip, anxiety bubbling up again. "I don't know if I'm ready." "You were ready today," he pointed out, "and you'll be even more ready with a week of practice." Before she could respond, the door opened. A girl with curly hair poked her head in, the one with purple streaks who had been recording Ling earlier. "Sorry to interrupt," she said. "I was looking for—" Her eyes landed on Ling. "Oh, you're here. Good." She stepped into the room, followed by Brooke and Dylan. Ling tensed, her fingers curling protectively over the piano keys. "Ling, these are some of our music students," Mr. Chen explained. "Zoe plays violin, Brooke sings in the choir, and Dylan is our drummer." Zoe, the purple-haired girl, stepped forward. "We wanted to talk to you about the talent show. We have this band, but our keyboard player moved away last month. And you're like, a million times better than she was anyway," Brooke added, her usual confidence back but with a new note of respect. Dylan nodded enthusiastically. "We have this song we've been working on. It's kind of a mix of classical and rock. After hearing you play today, we thought maybe you want me in your band?" Ling asked, not sure she was understanding correctly. "Just for the talent show," Zoe clarified. "To see how it works out. We practice on Tuesdays and Thursdays after school." Ling looked at Mr. Chen, who seemed as surprised as she was. "It's up to you," he said. "You could perform solo or with them. Or both," Dylan suggested. "The rules say you can enter twice if it's in different categories." Ling's mind raced. This morning she had been invisible. Now these same students who had laughed at her were asking her to join them. Part of her wanted to refuse, to hold on to the hurt they had caused, but another part, the part that had been lonely for weeks, saw an opportunity. "I need to think," she said finally. "Fair enough," Zoe replied, pulling out her phone. "Can I get your number?" "For band stuff, if you decide to join us." After exchanging contact information, the first time any student had asked for her number, the 3 band members left, promising to text her about their next practice. When they were gone, Ling turned to Mr. Chen. "Why they want me now?" "Because I play piano good?" His expression was thoughtful. "Partly, yes. People are often impressed by talent. But I think it's more than that. You showed them something they didn't expect. You surprised them. Sometimes that's all it takes to change how people see each other." Ling nodded slowly, considering his words. "Now," he said, gesturing to the piano. "Shall we begin your practice?" For the next hour, Ling lost herself in the music. Mr. Chen offered suggestions, helping her work through the rusty spots in her playing. By the time they finished, the sun was setting, casting long shadows through the classroom windows. "Same time tomorrow?" Mr. Chen asked as Ling packed up her things. "Yes," she replied, feeling a sense of purpose she hadn't felt since leaving Shanghai. "I be here." The walk home felt different. The same streets, the same houses, but Ling moved through them with her head a little higher. In her backpack was the folder of sheet music, a promise that part of her old life could exist in her new one. Her phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. No pressure about the band. But if you want to hear what we sound like, we're playing at the coffee shop on Main Street this weekend, 2 p.m. Saturday. Another text followed, this one from a number she didn't recognize. This is Brooke, sorry about this morning. And all the other mornings. We were jerks. Ling stared at the message, not sure how to respond. An apology was the last thing she had expected. Her parents were both home when she arrived. Her mother was cooking dinner, the small kitchen filled with the familiar smells of ginger and garlic. Her father sat at the table, a pile of job applications in front of him. "You late today?" her mother said, looking up from the stove. "Everything okay?" Ling set down her backpack. "I was practicing piano." "At school?" Her parents exchanged surprised glances. "Piano?" her father repeated. "You found piano at school?" "In music room," Ling explained. "My teacher, Mr. Chen, he say I can practice there every day after school." Her mother wiped her hands on a dishcloth, her expression a mix of happiness and concern. "That's wonderful, but your studies?" "Mr. Chen say music is study too," Ling replied, feeling suddenly defensive. "And I keep up with other classes. I promise." Her father studied her face. "You look different today." "Something happened?" Ling hesitated, trying to find the right words to explain how her world had shifted. "I played piano at school. People heard me, they liked it." It was such a simple summary of what had happened, but her father seemed to understand the weight behind it. He smiled, and a real smile that reached his eyes, the first Ling had seen in months. "Good," he said. "This is good." "There's a talent show next Friday," Ling continued, gaining confidence. "Mr. Chen wants me to play, and some students asked me to join their band too." "Band?" her mother asked, looking confused. "What kind of band?" "Rock band, I think. But they want to mix classical music too. They need keyboard player." Her mother frowned slightly. "Classical is better for your training. More serious." "Let her try both," her father suggested, surprising Ling. He had always been the stricter parent when it came to her music education. New country, new opportunities. Music is music. During dinner, Ling told them more about her day, the auditorium, the Chopin piece, Mr. Chen's offer to help her practice. She left out the part about being mocked, about how the same students who had laughed at her that morning were now texting her apologies and invitations. Some things were still too complicated to explain. After dinner, while her mother washed dishes, her father motioned for Ling to follow him to their small living room. From behind the couch, he pulled out a battered cardboard box she hadn't seen before. "I was waiting for right time," he said, opening the box carefully. Inside, nestled in bubble wrap, was a digital keyboard. Not a full piano, it had only 61 keys instead of 88, but a keyboard nonetheless. "Where did you get this?" Ling asked, running her fingers over the keys in disbelief. "Man at factory was selling. Not very good, but better than nothing." Her father looked embarrassed by the keyboard's obvious second-hand condition. "I'd trade my watch for it." Ling looked up sharply. Her father's watch had been a gift from his university colleagues when he left his teaching position. It was one of the few valuable things he'd brought from China. "You'd trade your watch? For this?" He shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "Watch only tells time. This," he gestured to the keyboard. "This tells your story." More important, tears filled Ling's eyes. She plugged in the keyboard with trembling hands and pressed a key. The sound was tinny compared to a real piano, but it was music. Music in their silent apartment. "Not as good as school piano," her father said apologetically. "It's perfect," Ling whispered, wrapping her arms around him in a fierce hug. "Perfect." That night, after her parents went to bed, Ling sat with her new keyboard, using headphones so she wouldn't disturb the neighbors. Her fingers moved over the keys, playing softly, finding comfort in the familiar patterns. Her phone lit up with another text, this time from Dylan. "Our band is called Quantum Theory." Weird name, I know. Zoe's dad is a physics teacher. "Anyway, hope you'll join us." Ling smiled to herself, thinking of Mr. Chen's words. Sometimes that's all it takes to change how people see each other. She began to play again, a melody forming under her fingers. Not Chopin this time, but something new. Something that was neither fully Chinese nor fully American, but somehow both. Something that was uniquely hers. Perhaps this was how you built a bridge between two worlds, one note at a time. Saturday. Morning arrived with weak sunshine filtering through the thin curtains of Ling's bedroom. She had practiced on her new keyboard until late the night before, her fingers rediscovering their strength and flexibility. The small apartment had come alive with music again, even if only through headphones. Her phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Don't forget, coffee shop at 2 p.m. if you want to see us play." No pressure. Ling stared at the message, indecision gnawing at her. Part of her wanted to go, to see what kind of music this band played, to potentially become part of something at her new school. Another part felt scared. What if they were only being nice because of her piano skills? What if it was all some elaborate joke? She thought of her father trading his precious watch for the keyboard. That level of sacrifice deserved courage in return. "I'll be there," she texted back. Her mother was hanging laundry on the small balcony when Ling emerged from her room. On weekends, her mother didn't clean houses, instead catching up on chores at home. "Good morning," her mother said in Mandarin. "You slept late today." "I was practicing until midnight," Ling replied, helping to hang a damp shirt on the line. Her mother smiled, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind Ling's ear. "I heard you. It reminded me of home." They worked in comfortable silence, hanging the family's modest collection of clothes to dry in the morning sun. "Mom," Ling said finally, "there's a coffee shop on Main Street. Some students from school are playing music there this afternoon. I thought I might go listen." Her mother raised an eyebrow. "These are friends of yours now?" Ling considered the question. "Not yet. But maybe." Her mother studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, but home by dinner." The Main Street coffee shop was a small, cozy place with mismatched furniture and local artwork on the walls. When Ling arrived 15 minutes before 2, it was already half full with Saturday afternoon customers. In the corner, Zoe and her bandmates were setting up equipment. Ling chose a seat near the back, ordering a hot chocolate she could barely afford, just to have a reason to stay. From her vantage point, she could observe without being immediately noticed. Dylan was adjusting a drum set, his movements quick and practiced. Brooke stood near a microphone, doing vocal warm-ups that Ling couldn't hear over the coffee shop chatter. Zoe tuned an electric violin, something Ling had seen online but never in person. A boy Ling didn't recognize connected cables to an electronic keyboard that looked much nicer than her own. This must be their temporary replacement, she thought. Zoe looked up, scanning the growing crowd, and spotted Ling in the back. Her face broke into a wide smile, and she waved enthusiastically, then nudged Dylan and pointed. Soon all the band members were looking her way, offering smiles and nods of greeting. Ling felt her cheeks warm as she gave a small wave back. She wasn't used to being noticed, much less welcomed. At exactly 2 o'clock, the coffee shop owner stepped up to introduce the band. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Quantum Theory, some of Roosevelt High's finest musicians." The small crowd applauded politely as the band took their positions. Brooke approached the microphone, suddenly transformed from the sometimes mean girl at school to a confident performer. "Thanks for coming out today," she said, her voice strong and clear. "We're going to play a mix of covers and originals. Hope you enjoy." They launched into their first song, a cover of a pop hit Ling recognized from radio stations. Brooke's voice was surprisingly good, powerful, and expressive. Dylan's drumming provided a solid foundation, while Zoe's electric violin added an unusual and captivating element to the familiar tune. The keyboard player was technically competent, but seemed to be holding back, playing simple chords rather than taking advantage of the instrument's potential. They played 4 songs, each better received than the last. Their final piece was an original composition, a moody, atmospheric piece that started with Zoe's violin playing a haunting melody before the others joined in. The keyboard part was particularly uninspired in this one, just basic chord progressions that did little to enhance the otherwise interesting music. When they finished, the coffee shop erupted in applause. Ling found herself clapping harder than anyone, impressed despite her initial reservations. After they packed up their instruments, the band members made their way to Ling's table. "You came," Zoe said, sliding into the chair across from her. "You guys were really good," Ling said honestly. "Except for the keyboard parts," Dylan said with a grimace. "No offense, Jake." The keyboard player, Jake, shrugged good-naturedly. "None taken. I'm a guitar player filling in on keys, not my instrument. That's why we need you," Brooke said, looking directly at Ling. "After hearing you play yesterday, it would take our sound to a whole new level." Ling sipped her hot chocolate, buying time to think. Your music is different from what I play. That's the point, Zoe said excitedly. The mix of classical training with our more modern sound, that's what would make it special. I don't know rock music, Ling admitted. But you know music, Dylan countered. The rest is just details. They spent the next hour talking about their band, their influences, and their plans for the talent show. Ling found herself relaxing as the conversation flowed. These were serious musicians who respected her abilities. The mockery from earlier in the week seemed to belong to a different lifetime. We have practice on Tuesday after school, Brooke said as they were leaving. Will you at least try one session with us? Ling thought of Mr. Chen's advice to try new things in this new country. Okay, one practice. Walking home, Ling felt lighter than she had in months. She had spent an afternoon with people her age, talking about music, being treated as someone with valuable skills to offer. Not quite friendship yet, but something close to it. Her father was home when she arrived, sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread out in front of him. The smile on his face told her the news before he spoke. I got job, he said in English, pride evident in his voice. Starting Monday. What job? Ling asked, setting down her backpack. Maintenance supervisor at factory. Not engineer, he acknowledged with a small shrug. But better than nothing. Uses some of my skills. That's wonderful. Ling hugged him tightly, feeling some of the worry that had been her constant companion begin to lift. How was coffee shop? Her father asked as they set the table for dinner. You meet friends there? Maybe friends, Ling said cautiously. They want me to play keyboard in their band for talent show. Her father nodded approvingly. Good. Music brings people together across all differences. Sunday passed quickly, with Ling dividing her time between homework and practicing both classical pieces for Mr. Chen and popular songs she thought might work with quantum theory. The digital keyboard her father had traded for was limited, but it allowed her to explore new styles and sounds. Monday at school was a revelation. People who had never spoken to her before now nodded hello in the hallways. Her English teacher, Ms. Park, asked her to stay after class. Mr. Chen told me about your piano playing, she said when the other students had left. It got me thinking. You're having trouble expressing yourself in English. But you're clearly very intelligent. Ling waited, not sure where this was going. I'd like to try something different with your assignments, Ms. Park continued. Instead of the standard essays, I want you to write about music. Pieces you love, composers you admire, how music makes you feel. Write it in English, but if you get stuck, you can use Mandarin and we'll translate together. Really? Ling asked, unable to hide her surprise. Really? Sometimes we need to start from our strengths. Ms. Park smiled. Your first assignment is to write about the piece you played in the auditorium. Why you chose it. What it means to you. For the first time, Ling left English class feeling excited rather than anxious. By Tuesday afternoon, word had spread throughout Roosevelt High about the quiet Chinese girl who played piano like a professional. The talent show sign-up sheet had her name listed twice, once as a solo pianist performing Chopin, and once as the newest member of quantum theory, though she hadn't officially agreed yet. The band practice room was smaller than the main music room, crowded with amplifiers, microphones, and instruments. Zoe, Brooke, and Dylan were already setting up when Ling arrived. You came, Dylan said, looking genuinely pleased. I said I would, Ling replied, moving toward the keyboard set up in the corner. We thought we'd work on our original song, Zoe explained, picking up her electric violin. It's the one we want to perform at the talent show. Jake's keyboard part was, well, you heard it. Very basic, Ling agreed diplomatically. Brooke handed her some sheet music. This is the chord progression and basic melody, but feel free to add your own ideas. Ling studied the music. It was simpler than the classical pieces she was used to, but she could see the potential. The melody was haunting, with an unusual time signature that gave it a distinctive rhythm. Can I hear you play it first? She asked. Without keyboard, just to understand. They played the piece as a trio, violin, drums, and Brooke's voice. Without the keyboard's bland chords, the raw emotion of the song came through more clearly. It told a story of longing, of searching for something just beyond reach. When they finished, Ling nodded slowly. I think I understand now. She placed her hands on the keyboard and began to play, not the simple chords Jake had used, but a complex arrangement that complemented the violin's melody, adding depth and texture while never overshadowing the voice. Her classical training gave her the technical skill to support the song, while her innate musicality helped her understand what the piece needed. The other band members exchanged looks of amazement as Ling transformed their song. When they reached the end, there was a moment of stunned silence. That was... Brooke began, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. Incredible, Dylan finished for her. You just took our song to a whole different level. Zoe was already scribbling notes on her sheet music. Can you play that again? I want to make sure we capture what you just did. They spent the next hour refining the arrangement, with Ling gradually becoming more comfortable offering suggestions about the structure and dynamics of the piece. Her English might still be hesitant, but when it came to music, she could communicate with perfect clarity. As they packed up at the end of practice, Brooke turned to Ling. So, are you in? For the talent show? Ling thought about Mr. Chen's encouragement, her parents' sacrifices, and the feeling of belonging she'd experienced in the past hour, something she hadn't felt since leaving Shanghai. Yes, she said, a smile spreading across her face. I'm in. Walking home that evening, Ling realized she was humming the band song, her mind already working on ways to improve her part. For the first time since arriving in this strange new country, she was looking forward to tomorrow, and in her pocket was her phone, now filled with text messages from people who, just days ago, had looked right through her as if she didn't exist. One new world had been taken from her when they left Shanghai, but perhaps through music she was building another. The week before the talent show passed in a blur of practices, both with quantum theory and alone with Mr. Chen. Ling's fingers developed small blisters from the hours spent at the keyboard, but she barely noticed. Music had become her bridge, between her old life and new one, between isolation and connection. Thursday afternoon, Mr. Chen stopped her as she was packing up after their practice session. Someone is coming to the talent show tomorrow who I think you should meet, he said, a mysterious smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Who? Ling asked, curious. Dr. Eleanor West. She's the director of the Young Musicians program at the university downtown. I sent her a video of you playing Chopin. He paused, watching her reaction. She was very impressed. Ling's hands stilled over her backpack. You recorded me? That first day in the auditorium. I hope you don't mind. Mr. Chen looked slightly embarrassed. When I saw what you could do, I knew she needed to hear you. But why? What does she want? To meet you. To discuss possibilities. He placed a hand on her shoulder. The program offers scholarships, Ling. Weekend classes for exceptional students regardless of their financial situation. The words took a moment to sink in. Weekend classes, scholarship, a chance to continue her musical education, something she'd thought was lost forever when they left Shanghai. My parents, she began. I've already spoken with your father, Mr. Chen said. He asked many questions, but he supports the idea. It would be just on Saturdays, and the university provides transportation. Ling felt tears threatening and blinked them away. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet, Mr. Chen cautioned. Dr. West will want to hear you play tomorrow. The video impressed her, but she needs to see you perform live. Pressure settled on Ling's shoulders, so I must be perfect. Mr. Chen shook his head firmly. Not perfect, authentic. Play with your heart like you did that first day. That's what moved me, and that's what will move her. By the time Ling arrived home, her emotions were a tangled mess of excitement and anxiety. Her mother noticed immediately. What's wrong? She asked in Mandarin, setting down the laundry she was folding. Did something happen at school? Ling explained about Dr. West and the scholarship program. Her mother's eyes widened. Your father mentioned a teacher called him, but I didn't know it was for something so important. She took Ling's hands in hers, examining the small blisters on her fingertips. You're practicing too much. Your hands will be sore for tomorrow. I need to be ready, Ling insisted. Her mother's expression softened. I know, but a musician must care for her instruments. She led Ling to the bathroom where she pulled out a small jar of ointment from the medicine cabinet. This will help. Your grandmother used it on my hands when I was learning guzheng. As her mother gently applied the cool ointment to Ling's fingertips, Ling felt a sudden wave of homesickness for Shanghai, for her grandmother's apartment filled with the smell of jasmine tea, for the familiar rhythm of her old life. I miss home, she admitted quietly. Her mother nodded, understanding in her eyes. I know, I do too. She finished with the ointment and closed the jar. But home isn't just a place. It's people. It's the feeling of belonging. She smiled slightly. And maybe for you, it's also music. That night, Ling slept with her hands carefully positioned to protect her tender fingertips. Her dreams filled with melodies that blended Chopin with quantum theory's rock rhythms. Friday dawned clear and crisp. Ling dressed with unusual care, selecting her nicest pair of jeans and a blue sweater her mother had found at a second-hand store but had never been worn. She pulled her hair back with a butterfly clip that had made the journey from Shanghai, a gift from her grandmother on her last birthday in China. The school was buzzing with excitement for the talent show, which would take place during the last 2 periods of the day. Posters lined the hallways and students chatted about which acts they were most looking forward to seeing. Nervous? Zoe asked, falling into step beside Ling as they walked to English class. A little, Ling admitted. Me too. But the good kind of nervous, you know? The kind that makes you play better. Zoe nudged Ling's shoulder with her own. We're going to be amazing. Ms. Park handed back their writing assignments at the start of class. On Ling's paper about Chopin's ballade was a large A+ and a note. Beautiful writing. Your English is improving as quickly as your social life. Ling smiled at the comment. It was true, in just a week. She had gone from eating lunch alone to sharing a table with Zoe, Brooke, Dylan, and a growing circle of other students curious about the quiet girl who played piano like a professional. The talent show was scheduled to begin at 1 o'clock. Ling's solo performance was in the first half, with quantum theory slated to close the show. The order meant she would have to switch gears completely, from classical pianist to rock band member, in the span of an hour. As students filed into the auditorium, Ling peeked from behind the stage curtain. The space was packed, not just with students but with teachers and parents as well. In the 3rd row, she spotted her father, who had taken the afternoon off from his new job to attend. Beside him was her mother, looking both proud and slightly uncomfortable in this unfamiliar setting. In the front row sat a woman Ling didn't recognize, elegantly dressed with silver hair cut in a stylish bob. From Mr. Chen's description, this must be Dr. West. The knot in Ling's stomach tightened. The first few acts passed in a blur, a juggler, a comedy skit, a surprisingly good magic act. Then the student MC announced, "Next up, a piano solo by Ling Zhang performing Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor." The audience applauded politely as Ling walked to the grand piano. She adjusted the bench, took a deep breath, and placed her hands on the keys. The auditorium fell silent, waiting. In that moment of suspension between silence and sound, Ling thought of everything that had brought her to this point. Leaving Shanghai, the loneliness of her first weeks at Roosevelt High, the mockery that had turned to amazement, her father trading his watch for a keyboard, Mr. Chen's belief in her talent. She began to play. The opening notes floated out over the audience, gentle and questioning. Then came the build, the growing complexity as the piece developed. Ling's fingers flew over the keys, no longer aware of the blisters or the audience or even the scholarship that might depend on this performance. There was only the music, speaking what she could not say in words, the loss, the hope, the struggle, the possibility of belonging. The final notes hung in the air like a question waiting to be answered. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then the auditorium erupted in applause, the audience rising to their feet in a standing ovation. Ling blinked, suddenly back in the present, aware of the thunderous response. She stood and bowed awkwardly, unused to such appreciation. As she left the stage, Mr. Chen was waiting in the wings, beaming with pride. That, he said simply, was perfect. The rest of the first half continued, but Ling barely noticed, too busy changing gears mentally for her performance with quantum theory. She met the band backstage during intermission. "You were incredible," Brooke said, giving Ling a quick hug that surprised them both. The whole auditorium was crying. "Really?" Ling asked, startled. "My dad never cries," Dylan confirmed, and he was definitely wiping his eyes. Zoe handed Ling a bottle of water. "Are you ready for round 2? Completely different vibe." Ling nodded, feeling a strange confidence. After pouring her heart into Chopin, the band performance felt less frightening somehow. "I'm ready." The second half moved quickly, building toward quantum theory's closing number. When they were finally announced, Ling followed her bandmates onto the stage, taking her place at the keyboard. The lights dimmed slightly as Brooke approached the microphone. "This is an original song called Bridges," she said. "It's about finding connections in unexpected places." Zoe began with the haunting violin melody they had practiced all week. Ling waited for her cue, then brought in the keyboard part she had created, classical arpeggios that complemented the rock rhythms of Dylan's drums. Brooke's voice soared over the instrumental foundation, singing lyrics about being lost and found, about voices without words, about music that builds bridges between worlds. As they reached the final chorus, Ling added a counter melody she had composed just the night before, a phrase that echoed a traditional Chinese folk song her grandmother used to hum, reimagined in this new context. Zoe picked it up immediately, her electric violin weaving around Ling's keyboard line in perfect harmony. When they finished, the response was immediate and electric: cheers, whistles, and another standing ovation. Brooke grabbed Ling's hand, pulling her forward to share in the applause. For the first time, Ling didn't shrink from the attention. She stood tall beside her bandmates, a smile spreading across her face. Backstage after the show, Dr. West approached with Mr. Chen. "Ling Zhang," she said, extending her hand. "You gave two remarkable performances today, different as night and day, yet both extraordinary." "Thank you," Ling replied, shaking the woman's hand. "Mr. Chen has told me about your background," Dr. West continued. "I'd like to offer you a place in our Young Musicians program, with a full scholarship." Joy bubbled up in Ling's chest, but before she could respond, Dr. West added, "Both for classical piano and for contemporary keyboard studies if you're interested. What you did with that band showed versatility I rarely see in classically trained pianists." Ling looked at Mr. Chen in surprise. He nodded encouragingly. I would like that very much," she managed to say. "Excellent. We'll be in touch with your parents about the details." Dr. West smiled. "I look forward to seeing where your talent takes you, Ling." After she left, Ling was surrounded by her parents, bandmates, and classmates offering congratulations and praise. The girl who had been invisible 3 weeks ago was now the center of attention, not for her accent or her second-hand clothes, but for her music. Later that evening, at home, Ling sat at her digital keyboard, headphones on, playing softly while her parents talked in the kitchen. Her phone kept lighting up with texts from new friends and classmates. Her father came in and sat beside her on the bed. "You made us very proud today," he said in Mandarin. "The scholarship," Ling began. "It will help a lot, yes?" "Yes," he agreed. "But that's not why I'm proud." He touched the keyboard lightly. "I'm proud because you found your voice in this new place." "That's not easy," Ling thought about this. "It wasn't my voice," she said finally. "It was everyone's voice. The music just brought us together." Her father nodded, understanding. "The best bridges work that way. They don't belong to one side or the other. They belong to the space in between." Outside, the sun was setting on the small town that had seemed so foreign just weeks ago. It wasn't Shanghai. It would never be Shanghai. But as Ling played a gentle melody on her keyboard, part Chopin, part quantum theory, wholly her own, she realized it was beginning to feel like something else. It was beginning to feel like home.